Well, speaking of good news,
I was going to say, it is very good news.
well, it turns out that if we're looking to relocate, if we're taking Peter Hitchens' advice of flee for your lives, there is a country where you're allowed to hate foreigners. It's not the UK, despite the amount of them that we get every year. Small drawback, it's South Africa. Yes.
I've spotted a flaw in your plan.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not saying we love hating foreigners, of course we don't. We love them, YouTube. But if you are a person who does, and you go to South Africa, aren't you a foreigner?
A little bit.
Okay.
There are some hiccups, I admit, but look, the BBC decided to act as a travel brochure for anyone who is inclined towards xenophobia. And so I just thought we'd go through the double standards that's at this point redundant to point out, but just because it's quite amusing, really. That's it. If you want to learn more about South Africa, you can go and subscribe to our website for as little as £5 a month. It's a real steal at this point, and watch series like Brokenomics, where Dan had a chat to Rob Hersov, who is a billionaire investor, about how bad South Africa has got. But also, just not on our website, but I'd recommend Lauren Southern's old documentary on the South African farmers, because if you don't know the state over there, they're literally boiling people alive because they're white. So, yeah, I'm going to avoid that one. But anyway, on to the next link. Can I nick your...
Sorry.
That's all right. No need to apologise. I'm rubbish with tech anyway. So this is the trailer for the documentary from BBC News Africa. It's called Fear and Loathing in South Africa. And they're not sympathetic, but I don't think the BBC, in their write-up article version of this that we're going to be reading from later, would be quite so charitable to the concerns of people like this, were they American History X types, for example.
One wonders.
Hang on, they don't even need to be that. Literally, if you just make them white, I think they're going to be hostile to these people.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the treatment of Russell Brand, for example, on allegations that have yet to be criminally investigated, they have already said he is an unmitigatedly guilty rapist, which you would think might lead them open to defamation if it's proven to be untrue. And a bit weird considering he worked for them at the time and they were probably booking his cabs, but neither here nor there. But if you're a South African who wants to genocide other Africans, it's A-OK according to them. So I'll just allow, with a little video clip, these people to speak for themselves.
Distressing content, huh? Tell the foreigners not to disrespect
This is my country, South Africa.
I hate foreigners. And the government is doing nothing.
Christ.
And this is our leading anti-migrant group, Operation Dudula.
We cannot be undertaken by foreign nationals and do nothing about it. Something needs to happen.
We are coming for you.
So, thoughts?
Well, those guys are calling for violence, obviously,
Yes.
just to make things clear.
We have to disavow, of course.
Not endorsing any of this.
No, it's terrible.
But I do love this piece of content because whenever you meet like an average, I'm gonna say white normie, but it's of all races to be honest.
Yes.
In the West, they just think, because they've been propagandized to think this, that all xenophobia, etc., is a Western concept that only we have. And to see some local South Africans being like, "I hate foreigners," it's just the funniest thing to see. Because I bet if you show people that video, they'll be like, "Oh, there's xenophobia outside of the West."
Yes.
There's quite a lot of it. Huh?
In the documentary, they just go around harassing random black people on the street, saying that you showed up
Even though
yesterday.
they're black.
Yes. Saying, where are your papers? You're from a neighboring country. You have about 2 weeks to leave. Bear in mind, they don't have any actual legal power. They're just
They're
show
just
up
the
and-
EDL. What do you want?
Yeah, basically, the African Defence League. And they just knock on businesses.
They're coming.
They just knock on businesses and they act like a kind of ethnic protection racket. I would like to point out, though, that they're doing this interview and they're complaining about it. But as soon as one of the most prominent parties in South Africa decides to sing the song Kill the Boer, oh, it's just a protest song. They're just talking in metaphors, guys. They want to kick all of the neighboring African foreigners out, who might be perfectly legal as well. They're totally evil, totally wrong, totally unjustified. But if they call for mass genocide of the whites, just a metaphor.
This is how Western media works.
Yes.
It's like what you covered, where, actually jihad has lots of different meanings.
It doesn't
Kill the
mean-
Boer, there's more to it than that, guys.
Yeah.
Listen to me, yeah?
There's a quote from Norm Macdonald when he was playing Pigeon in Mike Tyson's Mysteries.
I love that show.
But there's a brilliant part where just they accuse him of homophobia. And he goes, "What? I'm not allowed to feel what I feel?" I've always got that with any word that has phobia at this point.
Yeah.
Like, what are we meant to do? These people are xenophobic. Well, we need special recommendations for them, special conditions. We'll set them up in a little area with no foreigners, and then they won't have to suffer anymore.
This is what happens with
That's
tribal
a solution.
many times as well.
Mm.
It's just, okay, if you desensitize the West to false racism accusations, then when we watch stuff like this, it's like, well, okay, I can't even be outraged. Like, what do I do? It's miles away. It's an inter-ethnic conflict. I can't be upset at this. I just wish that my taxes and my TV license, which I obviously pay, are going towards funding it. Like, thanks. But I thought we'd read the article just to write up because it's funny, really. So from the article, you can watch the documentary here. Comments are amusing, but the article is Inside South Africa's Operation Dudula: Why We Hate Foreigners. A polemic. Operation Dudula was set up in Soweto 2 years ago. The first group to formalise what had been sporadic waves of xenophobia-fueled vigilante attacks in South Africa that date back to shortly after white minority rule ended in 1994. How curious. They end apartheid and immediately start hating other Africans. It's almost like there isn't some pan-black, panaceic solidarity going on here. But there we go. So the story of the woman in the trailer, who so eloquently expressed her distaste for foreign nationals, is actually told in here. In a school kitchen in Kwa Thema, a township east of Johannesburg, Dimak Atso Mokena, I'm going to butcher all of these names, I'm sorry.
Perfect pronunciation. I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you. Is busy making sandwiches. The 57-year-old single parent of 3 has been a cook there for more than 10 years. It is hard to understand the strength of the hate until Miss McKenna pulls out her phone to show a picture of her son, emaciated with a glazed look in his eyes, angry burn scars spread over his body, up his arms and across his face. He started smoking drugs when he was 14 years old, she said, explaining how her son often goes out to steal things to feed his habit. One day, he tried to take some power cables to sell when he got electrocuted and burned. Her son uses crystal meth and neope, a highly addictive street drug that has devastated communities across South Africa. It's not until she blames foreigners for selling the drugs that her reasoning and support for Operation Dudula becomes clear. So, is this not very similar to the situation in the United States, which has spawned various waves of Republican voting, particularly in border towns, before the Safe and Secure elections, of course? I turned around and said, well, there's lots of cartel members smuggling drugs, mainly manufactured by the Chinese, that are very lethal in doses thinner than a penny across the border. Shouldn't we crack down on this because it's flooding communities and not only killing drug users, but being found on park benches and under mats in nurseries, being unintentionally ingested by children, and they're dying as a response? Shouldn't we be cracking down on some of these pipelines of drugs into the country? And the BBC are turning around to this woman who's basically lost her son and gone, and that's why you're a racist.
I'm not really sure what. I mean, the video was obviously like, the scary music is always a hint of how they want you to feel. But this article, I'm reading it, I'm just thinking, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see why she thinks what she thinks.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not actually hostile to her anymore. I'm just like, wow, you need some help.
Yeah.
We need to get rid of those foreigners who are, electrocuting your son there, burning him.
Is any dad who decides to go and break up a rape gang in Rotherham going to get similar write-up?
No, he got arrested
Yeah.
for trying to break into the house and free his daughter.
Yes.
Who had also been hooked on heroin.
So even if we're interpreting this as more sympathetic than the BBC intends to frame it, the fact that they're telling her story and telling the sad loss of her son is a far fairer treatment than anyone who in England has had their daughter's innocence and ability to have a nice normal life claimed by a bunch of Pakistani criminals who shouldn't be here in the first place.
The choice to platform this instead of something else at all,
yes,
with that information in mind, is just so insulting.
Yeah. It's almost like we have some pressing concerns about inter-ethnic tensions at home, which are perfectly reasonable to voice, and the BBC, the national broadcast that we're all forced to pay for, just neglects to mention them. But they will, if you watch CBBC as a child, teach you about white privilege.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing with the mind parasite of liberalism. What it does to people, where it's sort of just, oh no, we're just all individuals, and groups aren't real. Like Jordan I love Jordan Peterson, but when he says that there's only individuals, there's no groups. It's just like, clearly group identity is important to people.
Yes,
and it's an inescapable fact of life. And in the West, we are the weird ones for not recognizing and reckoning with that reality, right? We've been basically indoctrinated into thinking of ourselves as just again, these purely atomized individuals, citizens of the world and all the rest of it. When in reality, everybody else in the world recognizes themselves as part of a group. And that's an incredibly important part of their identity. Yet when we express concerns on behalf of the group that we identify with, we're called all the names under the sun.
Well, especially if we prefer that way of life.
Yeah.
We would prefer to be relatively race colorblind, but instead, people who do not share those values that are mass imported here, that have a raised ethnic conscience and think they are superior and hate us, inflict it on us. As soon as you turn around and say, well, they're victimizing me for being white, I wouldn't victimize them for being black, you're called a racist for just noticing that there is a racial tension here. And actually, you should shut up and take it. And that is implicit in the fact that they would not platform said suffering women of Pakistani rape gangs, but they do turn around and give this woman a fair write-up for saying we should get rid of all the foreigners by force. Not good, but there you go. I also just wanted to make the point that the ethnic tensions we have seen play out recently that show there is no black solidarity is also happening in New York and Chicago because of all the forced busing, where suddenly a bunch of the native black residents go, hang on, why is this a sanctuary city? Why are you sending all of these Hispanics up here? Actually, there are substantive welfare concerns. There are house prices. There is crime. And it's like, okay, the intersectional coalition only goes as far as Gibbs. That makes perfect sense. They do have quite an intersectional structure, though, because as we've seen, there's quite a lot of black women in the leadership. This does mean that during the documentary, one of their strategies to scare the foreigners is to twerk at them.
Sorry, what?
They sing, we show our asses to the foreigners, and they shake their bums at the camera. I was reliably informed by Lizzo in a TED Talk that twerking is in the bones of people of African descent, so I'm not going to question their cultural practices. All cultures are beautiful, especially this one.
The African EDL,
Yes.
their weapon of choice is twerking.
Yes.
Right,
Return to
okay.
tradition.
Sure, all right.
It's like a ratchet hacker. Anyway, Zandile Dabula, who was voted in as president of Operation Dadula in June 2023, see, they're a democracy, is calm, charismatic, and emphatic about the group's message. What a write-up. You would not get certain members of the EDL
Mr.
called...
Robinson is emphatic and supporter of his message.
Yeah. Mark Collett is calm, charismatic, and emphatic.
Well, that's not true, to be fair.
No, exactly. But you wouldn't get that either. Foreigners are the root cause of South Africa's economic hardship, she says. When it is put to her that this campaign is solely based on hate, she tells the BBC, we must be realistic here that most of the problems that we have are caused by the influx of foreign nationals. Our country is a mess. Foreign nationals are working on a 20-year plan of taking over South Africa. So it's
that's the real thing that made South Africa go downhill, didn't it?
It's okay to talk about great replacement conspiracy theories if it's Africans talking about other Africans.
Yeah.
Charismatic, they said.
This is state media that we're looking at, just to remind ourselves.
Yep.
It's the British Broadcasting Corporation. And this is something I've noticed many a time. We care about foreigners way more than we do our own people. That's our state religion.
Yep.
Some kind of minoritarian mindset. And you're absolutely right to point it out. Even the state media will come here and do this. This isn't some private corporation that's infected with woke ideology. This is the state's message, which is if it's a foreigner, well, then we care about their rights and their replacement. When it's domestic, shut up and take it.
Yes. When challenged on the veracity of this supposed 20-year plan, she admits it was a rumor, but she says it believes it's true. You see drugs everywhere, and most of the drug addicts are South African rather than foreign nationals. So what's happening? Are they feeding our own brothers and sisters so it can be easy for them to take over? She says. Again, I have to disavow that conspiracy theory.
Well, Mr. Robinson told me that in Luton, it used to be the case that you weren't allowed to sell drugs around the mosque.
Right.
Apparently that order is now broken down because there's just too much demographic change.
Right. Okay. So wouldn't that be deserve that ethnic tension there deserve a write-up by the BBC, you would think? Because they are the British Broadcasting Corporation, right? You would think that they would focus on that at home. I'm sure they'll get round to it. Just to let you know, they want to register as a formal political party.
Oh, God. Okay. Now I want to see this.
Yeah,
I want to see the posters.
Deport the foreigners and hang pedos is probably going to be quite a popular platform.
Simple as.
Yes. Bear in mind, this is at the time that Nelson Mandela's party has dropped below 50% in projected election polls. So that's one terrorist group being replaced by another. Hundreds of supporters have travelled to attend its first national conference in Johannesburg in May, where members voted to register the group as a political party. According to South African law, registering a party doesn't mean it will automatically qualify to contest an election. It has hoops to go through. Operation Dadula does not have a manifesto. I don't think it needs one. I think we're all sold. Or any policy other than its stance on foreigners. Though Mrs. Debula maintains it has a presence in every province except Northern Cape. Supporters of the new party who spoke to the BBC appear to genuinely want things to be fixed in their communities.
Imagine that.
That's not me editorializing. That's what the BBC have said. The BBC are saying, well, they seem like decent guys. Like, yeah, they might accuse all foreigners of being drug peddling, being here illegal, and they might want to pour petrol on them and set them alight.
Yeah, like
But they made good sandwiches.
the EDL never called for violence.
Yeah.
They called for deportations of rapists. And they got completely demonized. But these guys who are literally calling for violence are okay,
And we're having to pay for it.
according to the state.
They reflect a change of mood in South Africa's political landscape, with people fed up with the status quo. But if you voted for a Trump, you are a victim of Russian disinformation and you're a racist, and we will not give you a fair hearing.
Now vote the Dula.
Yes. And I just thought I'd go back to the trailer just to finish on a fun little clip. Just to show what these people have been up to. This whole write-up saying they were decent people concerned about issues in their communities was written after this was recorded and edited. And let's see if they're decent people and see if there might be some anti-immigrant groups concerned about demographic change in the UK that might not resort to these tactics that might get less favourable coverage. Go to the next one, please, John.
A so-called Operation Dudula task force is going to confront a local shopkeeper who they say is in a dispute with his landlady over rent.
Do you have a relevant document to be here in South Africa?
Mamela, where's the papers of this business? Bring the papers, put the papers in.
The shopkeeper is forced to sign an agreement giving him 2 months to leave the premises.
This is Vigilantism.
This one?
Yes. You're not a judge, you're not a policeman, you're not a lawyer, but you just try to hold a hearing.
Since you intervened, you made sure there's a peace.
Well, you threatened him and you didn't really give him a real option. I was there, I saw it.
You're not vigilant. He is illegally here. If he was not here, we wouldn't never have this problem.
If I might just suggest something. If the government is truly concerned about the emergence of vigilante groups on its streets, be it in South Africa or be it in the UK, just enforcing immigration law would do a hell of a lot to stop that happening.
Well, sorry, go on.
Well, I just think, of course, I don't endorse any vigilante tactics or any extra legal activity, as we're seeing here in South Africa. But it is a symptom of a wider problem. Don't expect people to have their kids peddled drugs by foreigners who shouldn't be here and just sit back and not take action.
That was my immediate thought, is this is what happens when the authorities don't actually enforce the law, especially on something as clearly emotionally
fraught.
Yes, as this. And I think that, again, this is not to endorse this kind of behavior in the slightest. But, I think it's only a matter of time before you start to see more of this stuff in other places.
Yes. On our own soil, probably, especially with the recent plan that because the Conservatives have dipped in the polls, they're going to shut down a bunch of migrant hotels and move them where?
Well, that was my question. They're not saying they're going to deport them. No. They're just going to move them. Well done. Well,
this was Jonathan Gullis yesterday on the Talk TV breakfast show.
Yeah.
Nicola Thorpe actually did a really good job questioning him. And she said, all right, so you're moving them out of your constituency because you're worried about your seat. Where are they going? And he just rattled off a pre-prepared speech. And you know what? I don't even dislike Gullis. He's part of the New Conservatives. Some of the New Conservatives are actually trying to do a good thing. But he just doesn't have the balls to turn around and say, you know what? Yeah, the government isn't prepared to deport them yet. I want them all gone because they have no right to be here. And as an MP, I will push for the government to deport them until they do it. You can just say, yeah, I'm going to hold the government to their own standards. But he's so worried about keeping his career because the front bench is against him and also retaining his seat because all of his voters hate him that he's caught like a rat in a trap. And so if the politicians don't represent your interests, you're going to get that.
And that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing. You don't want
thing.
that in your country.
But the BBC certainly won't give a sympathetic write-up to the English version of it. And I know it's redundant to point it out, but I'm pointing it out because, again, we have to pay for it. So thanks very much. If you hate foreigners, move to South Africa, I guess.
And then be hated.
Well,
swings and roundabouts.
They're probably civic nationalists.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on debating liberalism. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you, and goodbye.